Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you're interested or know anybody who would be interested in coming on chatting with me, feel free to reach me on Twitter. My handle there is IsaacR11, or you can reach out to me on Mastodon. My handle there is IsaacR11 at fossadon.org. All right, so with that out of the way, I'm really stoked for this one. I think we're going to have a great conversation. I got a great guest. Let's just get into it. My guest today is Angie Jones. Angie, do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey, Isaac. Hello, everyone. Angie Jones here. I am the head of developer relations at TBD, which is Block's newest business unit focused on decentralized technologies.
But you're not just that, right? Like
What else am I?
you are the internet celebrity tech influencer. No, I'm just kidding. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and we were talking a little bit before we jumped on about some of the things we can talk about. But I want to start out with tech origin stories. So, do you remember the first time that tech kind of introduced itself to you, and you realized like, I love tech. I want to mess around with computers. I want to learn how to write software. I want to do all these things. Like, when did you realize that was something for you?
Isaac, I didn't grow up in like the big tech era. Like I look older
Sure.
than I know I am older than I actually look. But so I didn't grow up with like computers, cell phones were not a thing. Like tech was not at your fingertips like it is now. And so it wasn't even on my radar as something that exists, let alone something that I can do for a living. I went to college totally unsure of what I wanted to do in my life. Like nothing sounded appealing from the limited number of careers that I was exposed to. None of that really sounded like my jam. So I went to college and I just picked a major. I picked business because I figure, okay, whenever I do figure my life out, I'm sure whatever I learned in like a business degree would be applicable. So my father was an accountant at the time, and he was really good about recognizing like emerging trends. And so he knew that tech was going to be on the rise. No matter what it was I decided to do, I'm going to need to know how to use a computer, for example. And so he suggested that I take a computer course. Now, again, me not knowing anything about computers, I just like look through the catalog and find the first course that I see that has the word computer in it, and I enrolled. This happened to be a C++ computer science course where they taught us to program. And me not having like any background in tech, programming, anything of this sort, I didn't even know enough to be like terrified about it. I loved it actually, and it was really fun, and it spoke to the problem solving skills that I enjoy. And so yeah, that's when I got my first dose of it and fell in love and ended up changing my major to computer science, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's funny how like it just kind of shows up, right? Like you don't really for at least for me, computers was always something that was like I was always interested in, but I never really realized that people can like make a career out of it. Like,
Yeah.
and then it just hit me. Like I always thought it was like, oh, it's like computers like video games, and then like the actual computing, like building software to run businesses, it didn't really hit me. And then when it did, I was like, oh, well, that's I like solving problems. I'm not super keen on like the math part, but the idea of like using some interesting sort of concepts to fix something or to make something work for folks is always super interesting. Random
Yeah.
question for you: like, what was your major before that? Before you kind of moved into computer science?
It was business.
Just business. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but this was my freshman year, so I
Okay.
mean, I didn't get deep into like that major at all. It just was something I had to pick to
Yeah.
like apply, right? And so I don't know, I can't even remember. I think I might have taken like one or two business courses or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it. So I kind of maybe went a little bit of the different route than you. So I was a computer science major first, and then I realized like, oh, like I like the businessy part of technology
Mhm.
a bit more than like I guess the more conceptual parts of computer science, like algorithms and data structures and things like that. My brain just didn't work that way. So
Mm.
was and when you started taking those computer science classes, did things just magically click for you? Like algorithms classes, data structures classes, things like that?
I wouldn't say that. So like basic programming classes, that sort of thing clicked for me pretty naturally. When we did get into the complicated things like um calculus, for
Yeah.
example, right? That took a minute. I remember that calculus professor saying, like, when it clicks, it'll click. I remember him saying that, and I struggled for a few weeks. And one day it just clicked. Like it's
Mm.
almost like you could hear the click go click
Yeah.
in your head, and it clicked. And I was acing things since from that moment on. For algorithms and data structures, I hate to say this. Oh, it sounds so negative. But like those professors were not the best, right? And
Mm.
so I didn't get a lot out of those courses and had to later I actually went on to do my master's in computer science too. So it was at that point when I really learned about that, where I had to kind of dig deeper for myself, and I had better instructors the next go around, and then it clicked for me. But no, it wasn't easy or intuitive like from the jump for me.
Sure. So you mentioned that you got your master's. What was it about getting your master's that was really important? Because I think a lot of folks, especially, you know, the whole goal of going to college for a lot of folks is like, oh, I'm trying to get a job, I'm trying to make some money, I'm trying to become an adult, right? And the idea to like continue your education for an extra couple of years to kind of get that next level, right? So what was interesting about that for you?
You know what's funny is that I did my master's while working
Oh,
full
okay.
time. And so I already had a job. So I wasn't even going to do it to get a job. And tech is one of those spaces where you don't really get like extra money because you got a master's degree or anything
Sure,
like that.
sure. That's fair.
So the reason I went back is because I actually really love teaching, Isaac. And I wanted to teach. Well, I let's be real here. So tech money and teacher money is not in the same ballpark at all.
Yeah, yeah.
But I really enjoy teaching, and so I wanted to go back as an adjunct professor where I just taught on the side. And so I needed a advanced degree for that, and so that's why I went back. But I did that while I was working full time at IBM, and I was taking classes at the same time. And so it took me a little bit longer to get that degree. But yeah, after that, I went on to teach at local universities and colleges. So
So what was so for your when you got your master's, did you have to do like a thesis or a dissertation or any like long paper or like area of study?
there was actually two options. So I went to North Carolina State University for
Okay.
my master's degree. There's two options. You could do the thesis route or the non-thesis route, right? So I went the non-thesis route, especially since I was already working in the industry. Like, I don't know, that whole time I was doing my master, I just remember kept saying to myself, I already have a job. I don't have, there's certain things I don't need to do, right? I don't need to do like the group project, so I learn how to work with people. Like I already work with people for a living, like the
Sure.
things like that, right? So I didn't do the thesis route. I just did the non-thesis route, which is
Yeah.
basically the same thing. You just take all the courses,
Yeah.
but without the research, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. Like so here's a question for you. If you weren't given the opportunity to not do the thesis, did you have an area that you were like super interested in, like when you were taking computer science classes? And there's a reason why I'm asking, so I'll get into that after you kind of answer the question.
During that time, I remember like in my during my Oh, you're really hitting on some good questions. You're making me think and reflect.
Sorry,
And
sorry.
no, but then I'm like, oh, maybe that's how I ended up where I am now.
Yeah.
But like back then, I remember taking a course that really resonated with me, and it was about privacy. And this was like back in the very early days of like Facebook and stuff like that. Like a lot of the social media platforms weren't prevalent just yet. And so this was like ahead of the time when we were thinking about like privacy for internet users, and what does that mean, and how do we get on top of that and that sort of thing. So if I were to do a thesis, it probably would have been in that area.
That's interesting. So I have a thought on that, but I want to kind of get to the reason why I asked you. And the reason why I was curious is because the one area of the computer science curriculum that I did take that was really interesting to me was like the idea. So how cruise controls work, how traffic light systems work, because it's like up to, I guess, non-technical people, they just assume that it's like everything's on timers, right? Or there's like, but it's these crazy systems that are kind of always communicating with each other, like, you know, finite state automatons and things like that. And I just felt that was super interesting. And I had the reason why I think it was interesting is I had a really good professor. Like, back to your thing about some professors are good and get you excited about things, some make you not want to take that class ever again. And he just did a really good job of like describing the complexity of systems in ways that you wouldn't really think about it. So that was kind of the reason why I was curious, is like, oh, was there an area that you were super interested in? And I think your idea of a thesis is very interesting. Like, my first year in college was 2004. And for folks that were around in tech back then, that's when a website called thefacebook.com launched,
Mhm.
right? And it was only available for college students. So like, I remember, like,
I couldn't even get on, Isaac. I remember this.
you remember, do you have a story? Like, you're
No,
probably
no,
on
no.
my, you're probably
I
on,
couldn't get on. You're right. Yeah, I
you're,
was on
yeah,
MySpace,
you're on
building my little
MySpace, right? Yeah,
profile
yeah.
out. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So like, I have a whole thing about MySpace and how like there's a generation of developers who like they learned how to like build things by customizing their MySpace pages, right? Like that
This is
whole
fact.
like thing. Yeah. Like,
Fact.
yeah. So, but like I remember, you know, college, like I've been in school for like a couple of weeks, and like my friend is like, "Hey, have you gone to like thefacebook.com?" And I'm like, what is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's like MySpace, but it's like only for college kids." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
that seems interesting." So like I signed up for it, and then like I don't think I went on MySpace like basically ever again.
Oh
Um
my God.
like
Wow.
because all the people that I knew and were interested in learn, because MySpace was like just to connect with like people that are my age that are interesting, which is funny
Hmm.
because that was the goal of Facebook, and now Facebook is kind of like the way you keep touch with people for life, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Which is interesting. But anyway, all right. So you're you were in college, and then so you
Mm.
graduated, and then you're moving your master, but you had a job. So like, what was, you know, what was that process like for you, like getting your first job in tech? Like, was it, hey, you did a bunch of interviews and you just found something, or was there some networking involved? Like, tell us a little bit about how like you got your first job in tech.
Yeah, sure. So my freshman year of college, I went to a little conference. I don't even remember like what the conference. It was some tech conference, but I like always have been the type that like kind of like thinks ahead and like what can help set me apart and like those sorts of things. So this is my freshman year. I don't know anything. I've taken like one C++ class. I think I'm like hot stuff or whatever in this programming game. And I go to this tech conference, and there's industry leaders at this conference speaking, one of which was a guy named Sam Adams. Sam Adams was a distinguished engineer at IBM, which is one of the highest levels that
Yeah.
you can get to. And he's doing a talk. I don't even remember what the talk is about. He's doing a talk, but I remember at the end of that talk, he had a slide with his contact information, and he said, if anyone is interested in learning more, or doing an internship or something like that, hit me up. So I wrote that down. We didn't have phones back then. Well, I did have stuff online. But I wrote that down, right? And I emailed him, a nice little email basically saying that I enjoyed this talk and I would be interested in an internship. And he responded right away and said, okay. Like there was no interview process or anything like that, which now looking back leads me to believe that in that room there probably wasn't a lot of people that took advantage of that opportunity. Like he put that slide up and everyone clapped and walked away. And I might have been the only person. I don't know this for sure, but I'm looking back and thinking I might have been the only person that actually took action on that opportunity, right? And so anyway, he gave me an internship for that for the summer, and it was in North Carolina. I went to school in Nashville, so I had to like, fly out there, get an apartment, all that jazz. And I worked that internship. And then in college I did another in wow, that was a great internship. So I'm working with a distinguished engineer as a freshman in college. He taught me small talk, which was old back then even. Um but like that's how I got into like the object oriented languages and stuff like that. So he taught me small talk, and I sat in rooms with him and like this other distinguished engineer who he was really cool with, and just like watch them brainstorm and innovate and come up with like all of these amazing ideas. Um Man, Isaac, I'm telling you, like you're really helping me like discover myself here.
Well,
But
I'm helping you for your book. When you write that book, you're gonna need to remember all these things.
So anyway, like yeah, so I did that internship, and then I did another internship at IBM the next summer with a different group, and then I did two internships at Boeing as well. So by the time I graduated from college or was about to graduate, I've done four internships. I have like experience on my resume, not just like projects that I've built myself, but like real applications that I
Yeah.
worked on. I also um my so I went back to college right after that first internship. I'm really digging like object oriented programming at this point now.
Sure.
So I enrolled in a Java course, and that Java professor, oh my God, Dr. Ali Sekman, he was young and fresh out of like his doctorate's program, and he was this certified Java programmer, and he introduced us, and he was just so excited about the language that it was contagious, and I got so excited about the language. I'm still like in love with Java to this day. But he taught us the Java, and then he did a boot camp that summer. This is another example of someone presenting an opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And me taking advantage. So he's like, hey, anybody that wants to stick around for this summer, I'm going to do a Java boot camp. And, we're going to go beyond the textbook. We're going to go really deep into it. And I'm going to prepare you to take the Java certification exam. And so I did that. And most people went back home. It's the
Mm,
summer. You're a
yeah.
college student. You want to go home to your family and your friends, right?
Sure.
I'm telling you, like the decisions you make matter, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. I stayed around. I took the boot camp. I got certified in Java that summer. So by the time I was ready to graduate college, I have four work experiences on my resume and the industry certification in Java. Back then, Java was like kind of the hot new kid
Sure.
on the block. So a lot of your industry professionals were new to Java. So now you're interviewing and you're certified in Java. That's like, oh wow, right? So I didn't have to interview much. Like I had offers from both of the companies that I interned with, IBM and Boeing. And I did a couple of other interviews and job fairs as well. So yeah, I kind of had my pick there. It's like, where do I want to go and live now?
So let me just say something. So I like how you phrase it as I might have been the only person to take that opportunity, right? Like you're talking about your professor and all, and this other opportunity as well. What if it's the opposite? What if like 70 people did that and they picked you, right? Like I think that's one of the things that I always think about. It's like, am I thinking that I was lucky, or am I thinking that there's something about me that stands out, right?
Hmm.
So like, have you thought about like, obviously not to boost the ego a bit, but have you thought about like, oh, maybe there was something about me that stood out across
No,
a
I
bunch of other
didn't think
folks?
that.
No, you can't think
I
like
didn't
that.
think that at all. And I don't. I think you're on to something there, and that might be true in other instances. In that particular instance, Isaac, I just don't think so because I was a nobody. And this
Sure.
is not me.
Well,
Like, this is not me downing myself, y'all. Like, please don't feel sorry for me. But this was me. Like, I've taken one computer class.
yeah.
I have no background in computers. I'm a freshman in college. I live in another state. Like, there was nothing about me that I think was interesting enough for that man to give me an opportunity. I
Mhm.
just don't think so. That, I mean, you got to make me like go message him and go try to find him and say like, do you remember like 80
And he's
years ago
and
when you
he's and
gave
he's going to respond, yeah, like you were like the first person in the top of the email, so I just picked you out of 700
yeah.
people. No, but I think about this a lot, right? Because I think one of the things that's very challenging in tech is like this idea of imposter syndrome, right? Where
Mhm.
we're always comparing ourselves to others, and what that's a sometimes it's a good thing because it's always good to have some level of like value for what you provide and how it compares to others. But also like if you're constantly comparing yourself to people like Angie Jones, like you're like, oh, okay, all right, here we are. But I think one of the things that's interesting about your story is that you you are humble enough to recognize like, hey, maybe I just was the person who took that little bit of initiative and then ran with it, right? Have you been and listening to your background a little bit, like you talked about like 4 internships, doing all this stuff. Have you been like kind of have you had like that sort of that hustle mindset for as long as you can remember? Like just I need something I have a goal in mind. I'm gonna go down every single path and every single turn over every opportunity to get to that end goal.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But there was a point like when I was in high school, like I said, I wasn't exposed to a whole lot, right? I went to public school in New Orleans, right?
Sure.
And so I didn't know like what life could look like.
Mm,
And I actually met my husband in high school. And my goals, like in high school, I was working as a cashier at a grocery store. So I remember thinking I could work my way up there, at the grocery store. Like, I can do that or something like that. And my husband, he was just my friend at that time, but he kind of gave me like this pep talk to let me know that, I could actually do anything that I want. And even though I don't know what I want, I can do something bigger than that. And he helped me find colleges. He helped me write my college essays and things like that. I don't even know if college was on my radar, honestly. And so he just helped me see like my potential and like push me in that direction, to want more and to do more and to do better. And that's what I did. And so yeah, I think I've always kind of had that hustle about me, but I haven't always like realized
sure.
what I'm capable of.
Yeah, and I think one thing, like you mentioned, your husband at the time, or your husband, your current husband, who was your previous friend. Well, I guess your friends still now, but like,
Yeah.
uh, um, but like the idea of having somebody there to just give you a little nudge, saying like you can do this, like you can
Yeah.
do these things. Like, have you thought about that? Right? Like, I think one of the things that we're always looking for, regardless of tech, is just like somebody to like a support system, right? So, how important was it for you, like, friends, family, mentors as you were getting started to like that support system to help you to like continue to like step up and try new things, right? Because, you've gotten to a point now where you have to kind of give back, right? So, when
Mhm.
you think about giving back, like, do you also think about all the people that put a little bit of work into kind of getting to you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's my way of paying that back, is to
Mm-hmm.
pay it forward, right? Like I said, I don't think there was anything special about me at that
Sure.
time. And yet someone like gave me this wonderful opportunity to work at IBM, no less. Like this is a Fortune 500 company, and like this, I mean, that was so important to have like that experience on my resume, and that just opened so many other doors beyond that. So
Yeah.
who am I to like take that and like never look back or open a door for anyone else? Like people still give me opportunities like now, like even once I got in tech. So I'm in tech. I was doing fairly well at whatever company I'm working in, right? Like maybe I'm like respected on my team
Sure.
and things like this, right? At some point I wanted to work beyond the four walls that I work in. What if I could be like, like going back to just like pushing yourself to do more? What if I could do more beyond like this job or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And like I said, I love teaching and I did that. And so I naturally kind of gravitated towards teaching other developers who don't work with me. So my team was amazing, and I learned so much from them. Um and when we would go to interview people to join us, like we saw, like most of the people we were interviewing were not at the level we were at. And
Sure.
I really think that was because we just had so many great people working together, and it's that iron sharpens iron mentality. So I took that and said, what about if I like share that outside of just these cubicles, right? What
Mm-hmm.
if I share that with other developers in other parts of the world? And that's what I did. And in doing that, it was to give back and to help. But like I met so many wonderful people who could stand to take advantage of a small opportunity, right? Just like I did. And so whenever I'm able to, I try to make opportunities for people. As I was teaching people outside of my four walls, other folks started to notice me, other like very influential people like Scott Hanselman, like Sarah Drasner, like Kelsey Hightower, and all of those people have made opportunities
Sure.
for me. They've given me opportunities. They've amplified my voice um in doing that. Like I want to do that for other people if I can.
No, I totally agree. And
One thing Scott told me was like when you like when someone opens the door for you, kick it down so
yeah.
that a flood of people can come in behind you. Not just you. You don't just like squeeze your little self into the crack. Kick that thing down and make space for other people, and that has stayed with me.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Both Scott and Kelsey are friends of the show. They've been on previous episodes, and one of the things that Scott has always said too that I love is like this: to send the ladder back down, right?
That's
Like the
right.
idea of
That's
you climb the ladder, you send it back down so more people can help. One of the things that I'm curious to learn more about too is like you had like this passion for the I get making sure the next generation has a leg up than your generation or generations before, right? Like, how does education come into that? Like, you know, when it comes to how we learn, like obviously if you talk to somebody who learned tech like we did 20 years ago, right?
right.
Versus somebody who's learning tech now, like it's completely different. Like,
Mm,
what are some of the things that you think about when it comes to like educating like the next generation of technologists that are interesting to you?
yeah. I really value education, and it doesn't have to be in the traditional sense of a degree, right?
Yeah.
There's like just a abundance of educational opportunities available. Like everyone is teaching like free courses on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
If you want something a bit more in depth, there's things like front end masters and LinkedIn learning and like Pluralsight, Udemy. There's all of these resources available. Everyone has a Discord, so if there's even a niche that you want to get into, like, you can surround yourself with other people who are doing it as well. So I think education is extremely important, and it looks the same whether you go to college or if you try to do it on your own. And let me explain what I mean by that. um when going to college, you'll often hear people say is equally about, like, learning the material, but also about building a network and,
Mm-hmm.
like, finding other like-minded
Yep.
people and stuff like that, right? How many stories have we seen where, like, two dudes, like, met in college, they dropped out, they started their own, like, garage business, and now
Yeah.
they're
All the time.
billionaires, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not all the
So that
time, but enough for you to be like, oh, maybe dropping out of college is a good idea, right?
it's a thing. But the same goes for, like, if you're going to learn on your own. I think it's really important to also include that networking piece with it, right? Because knowing the material is one thing, but this is a really tough field. It's tough to get into as well. So if you can network with other people, find other like-minded people, I think that would be advantageous for you in this space. So education is important. I think networking is pretty important as well.
I think that there's two really interesting aspects of this. If you even think about like humans as a species, right? Like
Mhm.
I think we're always looking for like our tribe, like looking for the 150 people. Like I think like that's the number that I've always heard. It's like when we were cave people running around doing our things, like our networks were like 150 people or less. So like when we know around that, we typically in our lives come across or have relationships with that around that many people, give or take,
Mhm. Mhm.
like actual meaningful relationships. So we're always looking for that group of individuals, right? That like make us feel safe, make us feel comfortable. And then like the flip side of that is like this idea that like we're always curious by nature, right? I think human beings, you know, for the most part throughout history have always been like, what is this next thing? Like what is the thing that we're going to do? And some people have different levels of curiosity, right? And I'm curious to know like what yours is. Like when like in this is kind of progress into kind of the stuff that you're working on with TBD right now, because I think it's on that next level of curiosity, right?
Mhm.
So when you hear about new trends in technology, or it doesn't even have to be technology, like new trends in general, like
Mm.
how ready are you to proof of concept them, play around with them, research them, and see if it fits into your experience as an individual.
Yeah. So you remember I talked about that first internship with Sam,
Sure.
and uh I thought it was so funny because that was not a traditional first job, right? Our first internship. Usually, like, and I didn't know this at the time because I never like had one in tech, right? But usually you're going to be coding the whole time. Maybe you as an intern, you are working with a junior, or if you're lucky, a senior engineer or something like that. That was not my experience. I'm working with a distinguished engineer. So he's no longer like picking up like Jira ticket features and stuff like
Sure.
that. Like
Sure. Sure.
day, his day consists of whiteboarding and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the future and like crafting new tech solutions. And then maybe he'll say, oh, let's make a proof of concept and like build this thing out or something like really quickly, right? So that was my first exposure to like a tech job. And I think as I was talking to you, I never thought about this before, but as I was talking to you, I thought, huh, I bet that helps shape like how I think about tech and how I approach tech.
Sure.
So the first job that I took was actually like after college was IBM. I accepted that offer at IBM, and I started inventing, right? I started like seeing cool solutions like everywhere and coming up with like cool solutions and playing with new tech and wondering what else it could do and could it solve like these other problems that's not even in this domain, and ended up with I have like over 20 something patents, right? And so being on the cutting edge of
Yeah.
technology and like inventing and things like that are things that are that's what I do, right? That's what I do. And so yeah, that definitely has shaped my career and informs like some of the decisions I made for like employment. So like right now I'm working at TBD where we're working on essentially like digitizing a lot of things. So think of like as advanced as tech is right now, there's so many like antiquated systems,
Sure.
and most of that is because you're dealing with like governments or banks or something like that that's just like on old tech, right? So like even the process of like going to get my driver's license, like if
Yeah.
you do that in 2024, you're annoyed because now I'm like looking through mail. I'm
Yeah.
trying to find like uh electricity bills and things, or like
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
to prove my address, and like I gotta like, and I need like three of these things, and I gotta like go find my birth certificate or my social security card. Wait, I've moved like three times in the last 5 years.
Why
Is
do I
that
need
still
why
in
do
a
I need like my
box
last seven
somewhere?
addresses? Like that's the thing. Like
Yeah,
why do I need
yeah,
my last
like
seven
all of
addresses
that
for
stuff.
anything, right? Anyway, I interrupted you.
Exactly.
Keep going.
So I gotta like pull all of these like physical documents together to go to the DMV and stand in line and like prove that I am who I say I am, right? And so that's what we're working on at TBD is like, how do you streamline these sorts of processes? Like a lot of this stuff can be digital. We're in an
Yeah.
age now where we don't have to live like that anymore. So I live in Louisiana, which is the first state in the US that has the mobile driver's license,
Oh,
which
wow.
has been amazing already. And so like things that you can do by having like these credentials digital, and you can take them with you, and they're like tamper resistant. So what if like everything that I just said I had to take to the DMV, I just had in like my Apple wallet or something like
Yeah.
that, and I can just prove these things with like, these credentials that the source has already issued to me. That way I don't have to go and like gather all of this paperwork to go and prove who I am. I might even be able to skip the DMV and do this stuff in person. I mean
Yeah.
online, because I have like these digital copies that you can prove are authentic, and the whole process is streamlined, right? So that's the kind of work we're doing at TBD, and we're working with like open standards and implementing these standards, and we're doing it all in open source. And so it's really exciting work, right on the cutting edge of like, oh wow, implementing like the first version of a standard or something like that. It's pretty cool.
I mean, that's great. I as somebody, so my first job my first like tech job was in an insurance company, and I worked in the claims department. I was building like back end software for claims folks, right? So like I was working with claims adjusters all the time. And I would go up to the claims adjuster's desk, and there'd be stacks of paper everywhere, like literally stacks of printer paper. And I'm like, I have a question about this. And she would say, literally, hold on. And then just go over to a pile, like move half of the pile and get like 5 pages from like the middle of a pile of paper and then show it to me like, oh, we need the claims to be like this. And then, so
Yeah.
she had like in her brain, like a management system for all the paper. Right. Like, in my thought, like, as somebody who's as young, like, been around tech for most of my like young adult life, my first thought was, why are you doing this? Like, why don't you just have everything like in some system somewhere? But it took me a long time to realize, like, she had been working in that way for 30 years,
Mm,
right? So
mm-hmm,
like you're talking about things about digitizing, like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
digitizing data, And I'm always very curious to hear your thoughts, like as somebody who's on the cutting edge, right? And when you're building technology and systems for like the cutting edge, or like how to get off of these legacy systems, there's a step two that needs to happen is to like well, but like basically unbrainwash somebody who's worked in these old systems for so long, right?
Yeah.
So like what are some of the things that is it a user experience thing? Is it just is it a training exercise? Like what are some of the things we need to do? Because the last thing we want to do is leave these folks behind, right? Like we want to bring these people with us to the digital age where they can be more
Yeah.
productive.
You know, what I've learned in this role is that the people you need to convince are not necessarily your everyday citizens. Like people are pretty resilient and they adapt. Like if we just look at the world today compared to, let's say, like 10 years ago,
Sure.
drastically different in the way that we do things, and people have adapted. Like it's fine. um Resistance often comes from like businesses who like, I'm like this. Okay, I'm doing fine. I'm making money. The systems work.
Yep. Yep. It's
Right?
not broke, don't fix it. Yep.
It's not broke. Don't fix it. We don't got time to fix it. Right?
Yep.
This is not what we have time to do. So that's usually where you find your resistance, and it isn't until like either they start bleeding money or they have some horrible accident or incident occur, and it's like, all right, I guess we gotta like address this. Like, so that's what we're doing. Like that whole digitalized. Now I do work for a fintech company, so
Yeah.
we're looking as well as like, how do you use like these sorts of digital credentials in the financial vertical,
Yep.
right? So for example, every bank or anything like that, like financial institution, they have to, by law, there's processes they have to follow if they're going to do anything with money, right? I have to make sure that I know my customer. They call that KYC. Which means, anytime you go like try to buy something and people start asking your like, well, what's your name and your address and all this
Yeah.
stuff, that's what that's about. And they have to keep that on record, right? Anti-money laundering, I have to make sure like you're not like trying to launder money here. I have to make sure you're not on a sanctions list. Like there's lots of things that these companies have to do that go on behind the
Sure.
scenes. And all of that is a pain in the butt, and it's expensive,
Yep.
and like, they would love an easier way to do that. So that's some of the stuff that we're focusing on as well. Like if we digitalize a lot of this stuff, how does that streamline this process? Like if a bank has already done like KYC on you and you go to another bank, why do you got to
Yeah.
go through that whole
Sure.
process again? That bank is credible. What if they just issued you this digital like certificate or credential that says, yeah, Isaac is not on a sanctions list. I
Yep.
just checked, right?
Yeah.
I literally just checked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they could say, and another financial institution could say, oh, bet I trust Bank of America. Like they're a credible source. They said they checked them and he's good. All right, let's rock and roll. I don't need to know any more about you, sir. Let's just do the transaction, right? So that's what
Yeah.
we're trying to get to.
I think so. There's one step past this too, which is super fascinating to me, is like the idea of like owning our own data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we talk about this every now and then in tech, like every time like a major company gets breached, right? The question becomes like, why does this company have my data, and why do I trust said company with my data? Right. And I saw a talk from a friend of mine, Richard Campbell, a few years ago about like the idea of making your data your own. So like all of these services would then basically license out your data in some capacity, right? And the
Right.
question then becomes like, well, what's in it for all the companies then? Because all the companies want your data so they can market to you, so they can sell you ads, right? So if you take away that opportunity for them to get revenue, they don't have as much interest to provide you services for free. So the question becomes, and this is a bit of a tangent, but like, how do we go from like the, antiquated systems to digitizing these antiquated systems so we can actually be more effective with our time and more effective with the resources that it takes to run these systems, to eventually getting to a point where, okay, so like take your example, like, do I need a background check like every time every time I submit an application for something? Like, my background hasn't changed literally ever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's my
My last
past.
7 addresses is my
Yeah,
last seven.
my past has not changed because that's how the past works, right?
Right, right, right.
So, but to this point where it's like, okay, I can carry around this basically encrypted version of myself that I can then share with other entities to basically validate my identity.
Yeah.
How do we get
What's
to
your
there?
question?
I guess my question is, how do we get to there without breaking all of capitalism?
You know what? I think that there's a few companies that um have basically made their business model around utilizing people's data, right?
Sure.
Very successful. Um most companies